Hello, I'm Ross Taylor, your host and guide for Sacred Sundays, a space to slow down, tune in, and return to what's sacred within and around you. I'm also a life coach for empaths and sensitive souls, walking alongside those who are ready to come home to who they actually are. These conversations are part of fulfilling that purpose, a collective exploration of what it means to live in connection with the sacred. Some weeks you'll hear a sound-based offering to open the space. Other times we'll simply begin in conversation. However it unfolds, this is an invitation into presence, connection, and the beauty of the unseen. If these conversations find you, please subscribe, rate, and share so others can find their way here. Pour a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. Today on Sacred Sundays, our guest is Michael Sherlock. I first met Michael at a Fire and Bones workshop in Duncan back in 2012, which was a teen mentorship training program. And then later I reconnected with Michael when I did my initiation with the Mankind Project and have crossed paths with Michael ever since then. And more recently, I saw Michael at a welcome home ceremony for people who had gone through the same initiation ceremony that I did back in 2014. And it just crossed my mind. It was like, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with Michael. I love the way that Michael shows up in the world and with his elder energy, and it feels like it would be a great conversation. So, Michael, welcome to Sacred Sundays.
Thank you very much indeed, Russ. Thanks for thinking of me and making this possible.
You're very welcome. So let's start with the elder piece, because I would love to know how you feel about the role of being an elder and why the role of an elder is important in our community at this time.
Okay, that's a big question to open up with. Just like the guy next door opening up his Harley Davidson, just of course as soon as we were recording. Yeah, I was actually, the role of elder came to me. One of my mentors, a man called a Man Woman, who's a famous poet and elder from the Cranbrook area, and he had sort of tapped me on the shoulder at one point during one of the Mankind Project initiation New Warrior training weekends and said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a ritual elder and joining the elder team?" And I hadn't, and I guess I was probably just about 60 by then. So I guess I've forgotten that I was 60. And then I moved into being an elder with another mentor, a man called Noel McNaughton, who was a ritual elder in the Mankind Project as well as Man Woman. And he kind of walked me through a variety of different teachings during the weekend, mostly. And also, my third mentor, probably really the one that was most active and most prevalent, is Ipswa Meskakaganis, who is the Cree elder, Cree and Celtic elder, who I have had as a friend, and maybe he was even on that weekend back in 2014. That Boys to Men, that Fire and Bones thing that we were doing together, Ross.
He was there.
Yeah. So I maybe met him. I met him at a New Warrior training adventure as well. So we've been pretty close friends ever since. And so, with those mentors sort of walking me through into the idea of that there is a thing called eldership, and also being a father of 4 girls and a grandfather of 5 granddaughters, and still hanging out with quite a lot of younger people, I've sort of stepped more and more into the role of an elder. And what exactly that is, well, that's not such an easy question. One of the things I'm learning as an elder is to step back and let the younger people step forward and just hold that space while they go through. So you mentioned, the lodge and my experiences with the lodge teams and with the NEPI, and my general way of being is to kind of leap in there and pick up the axe and chop up the kindling and build things and rush around, and I'm not moving quite as fast. And now I'm really starting to see the benefit of sitting back and just watching how the younger men and women are doing that, and it's actually really such a pleasure to see them learn. For instance, one of the teachings that I first got around the lodge, the doobie-doo dance. In other words, if I'm too busy doing and I don't know why I'm being, if I don't know why I'm doing that, if I don't know why I'm chopping up the kindling, if I'm just chopping it up to get it done because I have to get it done, get her done, get her done, get her done. I don't think that's the energy that I want in the kindling that's going to be in a sacred fire. I
Hmm.
want each piece of kindling to have an intention, a piece that I'm doing this with the being intention of being part of each little piece, being part of this whole sacred ritual. And I see myself as one of those pieces of kindling too, just being part of the sacred ritual and being prepared and preparing myself and allowing nature and the trees and the sky and the fire and the water to prepare me. So I don't know if I got any closer to answering a question about what it is to be an elder, but that's where that question led me so far.
Love that. And it makes me think of a few things. And I'll start with, did you have resistance to the idea of stepping into being a ritual elder?
I think the first part of it was surprise that I would actually be considered that. In order to become a ritual elder in the Mankind Project, we sit on a sort of a hot seat, and there are our leader body and other elders and other members of the lodge team ask questions. And the first time I sat, I got what we call a not now. In other words, that I wasn't ready. And I
Mm.
wasn't, because I was asked a question by one of the co-leaders, and he said, when I'm starting to feel that I need some support, how's that going to look for you? How are you going to be able to do that for me? Are you going to be able to give me that without interrupting what's going on, or without, doing some kind of speech or grandstand? Or how are you going to be able to support me in that situation? And I thought, whoa, is that ever a good question? And I didn't really have an answer. And so when they said, no, not now, I went, you're right, not now, is the answer for me. So I kind of gradually stepped into it, and I think probably not so much resistance, but I saw examples, man, woman, Ipswa, Noel, a number of elders that I had as mentors as I grew up, which I was very lucky to have older men who I worked with. And they gave me examples of what it is to hold that elder space, and just to let the young people, rush forward and do what they need to do, and not have to correct, or not have to teach, or not have to have wisdom, or not have to have an identity as an elder, just to be able to hold that space. And I'm still working on how to do that.
That's fascinating because before you said what you just said at the end, I would have thought bringing wisdom and bringing perspective in terms of supporting that's a big piece of it. And really, you're just saying stand back and hold the space, which is equally as powerful, I think, if not more powerful.
Yeah, I believe from the experiences I've had in the indigenous culture is that an elder is a person that people come to. An elder is not a
Mhm.
person that comes to somebody else. An
Okay.
elder is a position I don't actually ever recognize as myself. If I am not recognized by the community as an elder, then I'm not. It's not
Hmm.
it's not a title that I would give myself.
Hmm.
It's the community is going to come to me and say, we want you to be holding this space. And then in that case, I would, obviously say yes. But it's not like I'm going to be an elder, therefore you have to give me some kind of special boy position or anything like that.
Right. And that's
Mhm.
exactly why I reached out to you because of that space that you hold and the energy that you bring and my experience of you over the years is exactly why I reached out.
Mm. Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I just want to step back because not everyone listening might know what a lodge is. And so could you explain that a little bit to someone who's never heard that term?
Sure. That opens up a large topic of conversation from the teachings I've had, from the indigenous teachings I've had. The Mankind Project used to have a lodge as part of one of their ceremonies in the weekend, the New Warrior Training Adventure Weekend, and that has been decided not to be part of the weekend because there's concerns about appropriation of indigenous culture. So my teachings first came from the Mankind Project, but through an indigenous teacher, Ipswa Meskakagnes. He was my teacher. So I came from it from a place of that I felt was a good place, that was not a place of ever, was a place of appropriation. The lodge ceremony is a purification ritual, purification that men really need to, I believe, have in their lives to reconnect with the sacred. Women have their natural purification cycle every month, and that's a blessing for them. But men don't have that, and so we have invented this ceremony where we build a sort of a round, sort of dome-like structure, usually of bent willow branches, cover it with blankets and other materials to make it completely dark and able to hold into the steam. And then while we're doing the lodge building, we have started a fire, and in the fire we have put a number of special rocks, which are ones that are a special lava type of rocks, so they don't explode, and they hold the heat and become red hot. We often refer to them as grandfathers. And then using a fork, we pick them out of the fire and put them in a pit in the center of the lodge, the dome structure that we've built. So the fire represents the sun. In the structure between the fire and the lodge, there is a mound, usually made from the dirt that is dug out of the center of the lodge to form a pit into which the grandfathers are placed. And that represents the sacred feminine, the moon. And then well, represents the earth, and then the lodge itself and the darkness represents the womb, the sacred feminine, and the darkness of purification. And so we move into it. We have a person who has been trained to be what we call a water pourer. So that means that they sprinkle water on the red hot rocks. The rocks are brought in. The people come in into the lodge, and then close the door, and water is sprinkled on the rocks, and then a huge amount of steam comes up. Herbs and medicines are often used as well. Cedar, sage, tobacco, and sweetgrass are very common, four of the very common ones used in the four different rounds. And then it's a question of intentionally suffering. From my perspective and my teachings, a lot of my time during my regular life, I might walk around inflicting suffering on myself, and unintentional suffering because I'm telling myself stories or making up stories about other people or what's going on in the world. And so there's a lot of unintentional suffering. So I go in there and suffer intentionally to make sure that I'm going to meet the visions and the prayers and the songs and the connection with the sacred, the connection with the spiritual world in there, as led by the prayers and the teachings of the water pourer. And I'm authorized to pour water in a limited capacity within local community. And we have an EP lodge at the property I live in Fanny Bay that my partner and I live on. So we do that all through the winter. And often Ipswell will pour if we can get him, and when we can, then I pour. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what would be a lodge or an EP ceremony. There's just one more sort of piece I feel obliged to tell in the teachings, and that is that there are some very different schools of thought that I've been taught from the indigenous community, particularly communities that are very strong with this tradition, such as the Lakota. And that is that on one side, there is a belief that if non-native people are going to ever understand the sacredness of the Inipi ceremony, then the only way they're going to be able to understand it is to participate in it. And then the other belief that I've been taught, and that is equally strong, is that why would the indigenous community give such a sacred ceremony to the non-indigenous community when everything else they've given has been abused and taken and stolen and appropriated and commercialized, etc.? So why would they give such a special ceremony away? And those two camps have both very, very valid points of view, and I honor both of them.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really important that you said that, because I've listened to a podcast where there was a Lakota elder talking on the podcast about his beliefs around that, which was the one camp of sharing the teachings. And even though the trauma had happened and it's important to heal with the same medicine and share that medicine, but I also see the other side of it. It's a really valid conversation.
Yeah, and the ceremonies that I've been taught to pour for and participate in are a set of ceremonies which are called the All
Mm.
Nation ceremony, and it's a particular ceremony that has been developed so that non-indigenous people can be part of. So it does not include any of the completely sacred ceremonies of any indigenous nation that I believe should not be shared with anything but their own members. So those
Mhm.
are very special ceremonies, and I believe they should be kept entirely within the
Mhm.
culture.
It's interesting because a couple of summers ago, I attended my first Sundance, and there was a part of me that felt like it wasn't my place to be there. I couldn't really articulate it, but it felt like I could really feel the sacredness of that particular ceremony. And that, first of all, that it was a real privilege and an honor to be there to witness the ceremony. But it felt like I haven't had that feeling when I've sat in the lodge. And yet at that ceremony, I was like, I don't think I should be here. It was really interesting. Anything you would say about
Mhm.
that?
Well, I've been offered the opportunity to walk the Sundance Trail, and I've felt that it wasn't for me. Partly because I felt that it was just too onerous physically and mentally and spiritually. So I have not attended a Sundance ceremony. I've sat with a lot of people who are Sundancers and
Hmm.
understand the incredible sacred nature and the an amazing amount of preparation and discipline that it
Hmm.
takes to follow that road. And so I really honor anybody who's done it. So I don't have an experience to share with you that's equal to your question.
Yeah, fair enough. And I want to double back to something you said as we began talking, which was that you're not moving quite as fast. And I love that because that's a theme that shows up most often in the conversations I have on this podcast. What have you learned by not going so fast?
Uh, yeah, it's I guess in the short answer to that was not so fast means more present, that
Right.
I can stay in much more in the moment. My planner, my manager mind is very often, planning, a couple of weeks or a couple of months ahead of time. I'm involved in tribal journeys with Ipswa Grandpa, and we're always trying to get that off the ground and get our family organized and get the canoe ready and the boat ready and the all the details. And those are important parts of being in ceremony with such an important event. But I'm starting to really realize that I'm kind of missing the point if I'm not living. It's back to the doobie doo dance again. If I'm not
Hmm.
there with the intention, with the be part, if it's all do, and I'm just on to the next step, flying along. So moving slower is being more present and being less involved with my identity as an I and more connected to the greater we and to the greater lack of separation that I feel is, well, I know that's where I'm going to be going eventually.
Hmm. And I'll echo that it's for me, it's an ongoing teaching that I'm fascinated by because like literally a week ago, I had an energy session with somebody. And the thing I say the most to people for different reasons is you have to go slow to go fast. And of course, the message that I got in that healing session was that I need to slow down. And
Yeah.
I get it because it I know that I continue to slow down, but I need to slow down more. And I laugh because I need to hear it often. And apparently
Hmm.
I need to really live it more. And I'm much more present than I've ever been. And yet I'm still not present as I believe we can be.
Yeah, I second that statement. I was actually working at the in the kitchens at the last weekend, the last New Warrior training weekend. I decided to do the MOS and kind of getting up early and in the mornings. I found I was a little bit dizzy, and so I started to move much more slowly and much more intentionally. I started to realize that I can actually only move as fast as the liquids in my inner ear can move. Because if
Mm,
I'm bending down to try and pick something up quickly and stand up again, my inner ear liquids just don't move that well, so I'm going to be dizzy. And so I started to really move much more slowly physically because of that experience. And at first I was, worried, oh my goodness, something's wrong with me. But actually the blessing from that came was just slow down, slow
Yeah.
down and just, chop those vegetables just as, they get chopped just as well if you chop them slowly as if you chop them fast.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such an important lesson. It really is. And you mentioned it in the context also of being present with the elements of the ceremony, honoring the elements of the ceremony, and otherwise that doing energy goes into the ceremony and we don't want that.
Hmm. Very much so. And really paying attention to the intentions of that ceremony and any other ceremonies. I follow the Red Road through that path, but I'm also very actively involved in a Sufi practice, which I'm finding very enriching as an elder practice and as a life practice as well. And oddly enough, when you know it, they're similar. Those practices that come from thousands and thousands of years ago or have similar wisdoms. It's quite beautiful.
It is beautiful, and I love that you mentioned that because recently I stumbled across something from Vancouver, and it was the Squamish First Nation, and it was a young woman who had just gotten back from, I think it was either Japan or Korea. And she went over there with her indigenous teachings and she went to experience the ceremony in that country. And she was blown away because what she saw was the exact same energetic traditions, but in a different way. And she's like, wow, like this is our ceremony, but it's culturally different, but it's the same.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so many of those sorts of ceremonies cross over. I don't know anything much about the Japanese or Korean, but I'm learning more about the Islamic and the
Hmm.
Sufi path. And yeah, it's beautiful to see how they meld.
Hmm. And what would you share that's important to share about the Sufi traditions and the Sufi practices? What do you see as important?
Well, for me at the moment, what I'm learning, first of all, presence, really being very much in the present moment through silence and through meditation. Not a very good meditator. I'm a very twitchy, kind of active, sort of ADHD kind of person. So I find meditating a really incredible discipline, obviously worth practicing more at. Another part that I'm learning a lot more about is releasing any sense of, I alluded to it before, of identity,
Mm.
of the concept of myself. If I call myself a self, if I call myself I, that statement intrinsically separates me from the rest of the universe. And that separation, as opposed to holding that I am part of everything and everything is part of me, is something that I'm really working on trying to understand. And then realizing that even if I say a word I understand, it's not going to be something that I'm going to be able to do with my mind. And so letting that mind piece go and just again, I guess the only other word I could probably say is be in the beams, dropping into my heart and dropping out of my head and trying to figure stuff out. And so that's the third part is the teachings that I'm getting from a new Sufi teacher I've just taken on and met because I'm walking with me is to let go of knowing and understand that it doesn't matter how much I read or how many masters I do or how many ceremonies I do or whatever. This concept that I have to, accumulate more of this stuff in my head called knowing, and that's going to get me closer to uh, the questions I'm asking about, the divine and the greater universe and the mystery.
Mm.
Dare I say the G word, God? And it's not a head thing; it's innately a paradox, and therefore I've got to be comfortable with knowing that it's okay not to know. So I'm working on those ideas as well releasing identity, releasing knowing, and that again as a piece as an elder, I feel is really important for me to hold that space for younger people as they, go through a world where we're, these phones and things we use and everything and all the information that comes flying at us and so much. It's just well, all you have to do is know more and then you'll be better informed and knowledge is power and maybe it's not. Maybe
Mm.
knowledge is confusion. So just holding that space for that and allowing that to happen. And allowing allowing myself to slip into that space of heart much more
Mhm.
than head, so that I can actually step away from separation and be in the larger capital BE type of capital S self type of thing.
The theme that we're weaving through continuously is this slowing down and being present. And when we are present, we get to see the messages that are trying to get our attention. And ultimately, there's a teaching that I follow or have been a part of that talks about this idea of the metaphorical car and the fact that we're not meant to drive the car. Spirit drives the car. We're just meant to be enjoying the ride in the back seat. And that metaphor has been really powerful for me because I'm often trying to drive the car of my life and drive my car in a way that my mind is trying to run the show. And when I do allow myself to get in the back seat, things flow quite effortlessly. And so it's this
Mhm.
interesting thing. But again, it's that whole slowing down and being present and listening to the signs and the guidance. And I imagine that that shows up in ceremony for you as well. When if we're too much in our mind, we're not going to get the teaching.
Yes, and that's where in the ceremony, certainly in the inipi in the lodge, with it being completely dark and with being, present to the heat, etc., then if my mind starts to focus just it's dark and it's hot, then sure, that's pretty obvious, but that's not where the messages are. And it's interesting that you use that metaphor of the car and driving the car and allowing spirit to drive the car because I also do an internal family systems therapy practice. I've trained to be a level one IFS therapist,
Amazing.
and we often use I often use the metaphor of who's driving the bus, which of my internal parts is driving the bus,
Mm.
and then again, I referred to the capital S self, which is a concept that's used in internal family systems to sort of denote that part of me that can step back and step out of the mind and step into the heart and allow those parts of me that are kind of maybe frantic and all kind of wrestling for the wheel of the bus or the car and to step back and to listen to them and to hear what they have to say. Again, the question of being present and to understand that they all have a valid point of view. They're all trying to help me in their own way. Sometimes they still think I'm like still 8 years old or something like that and trying to help me as an 8 year old. Hence when somebody say you're behaving like a child, and I go, oh, okay, so that's because that child's driving the bus. So maybe I should tap the child on the shoulder and say, "You're too young to drive the bus. You can hardly see over the wheel, buddy. Let alone think you know what's going down." And so that's just sit him on my knee and have a conversation and be kind to him and work from that point. But again, Dick Schwartz calls it, a capital S self. And what I really like about IFS is it links very much into what we've been talking about is he acknowledges that there is the spiritual guides that have guided him to develop this model, but that they are very much part of the model as well,
Mm.
and that I certainly can feel the presence of those guides when I step into lodge, and I ask them to show their presence and allow me to step out of the way and become the hollow bone, as is often used to describe just allowing that the spirit to flow through me so that the I doesn't get in the way, the ego doesn't get in the way and start to confuse things, or one of those little kids grabs the wheel of the bus and starts to drive it during ceremony. Not a good idea. So
Mhm.
all kind of links together for me.
And what you said reminds me of something that I've observed. I noticed it especially with my dad when he was suffering from dementia and before he passed, just this idea of we are children in adult bodies. And sometimes we stay in that childlike phase and other times we rise up from it and we start to learn and grow. And we are trying to be adults, but we're still children at heart. So it's interesting because like allowing that joy and wonder to emerge as well is important.
Hmm.
And I that's why I love the analogy of the child driving the bus because you wouldn't want a child driving a bus, and yet there are children living as adults and driving that bus of their life. So it's really a fascinating conversation and kind of leads into what would be my next question, which is why do you think it's important for men to explore men's work?
Well, I think first and foremost, because we have been so enculturated into so many ideas of what being a man is, that there are so many unhealthy models out there. I went to see The Mandalorian and Gogu, whatever that movie last night because a friend of
Mm,
mine invited me for his birthday, and I was looking at it and I just thought, wow, this movie has so many examples of unhealthy masculinity in it.
mm,
The completely independent, don't have to ask any help, always strong, always tough, and the answer to everything is more violence and more violence and a fancier gun or a fancier hand grenade or something. And so, I believe men are being raised through the media now to be so held in a limited box that just does not allow so many other aspects that are so beautiful that men have. The word patriarchy comes to my mind, and so many men are raised as victims of the patriarchy just as much as the women are, because they're told that this is how they have to behave in
mm,
order to be accepted into a man's world. And clearly that's toxic. And clearly it's
mm,
damaging for the men, because then it continues to damage society because of that simplistic model. So men stepping into vulnerability, men stepping into emotional education, men stepping into the beauty and the wonder of who they are, their imagination, their strength, their passion, their dynamism for the good of the world. Like at the end of the movie, let's just kill them all then. Let's
mm,
just blow them all up. That's just another war movie. And so many men, so many young men have been sent to war. Where have all the flowers gone, and sent to war to die with
mm,
for a needless cause when there's so many other aspects of manhood that can be explored. So I have a lot of passion about, bringing men into their full potential and their full
mm.
beauty and the wonder, as you say, that we have. So that would be the short answer.
It's funny because as much as I ask that question, it is something that's difficult to articulate fully because I noticed that in my culture, there's not a lot of initiation that happens organically. And that's why stepping towards this weekend with the Mankind Project for me was that initiation. And I can only say that during my initiation, there was something that just transformed. There was this energetic shift, something that was dormant in me that woke up. And that part of me that woke up really changed the trajectory of where I was going and in a way
Mm,
that I couldn't have imagined. And so it's like, we sometimes call it the wild man. We can call it warrior energy, but it's even bigger than that. It's not identifiable, but it's like my spirit woke up. And I've continued to learn and grow and struggle and have challenges, but from a very different place. And I'm so grateful for that initiation experience. And sometimes we're lucky enough to have experiences in our life that act as that initiation experience, but often not because we've lost connection with our fathers and where our fathers work. And sometimes we would work with our fathers, and that doesn't happen as often as it used to. There's just this emptiness that I think men speak of that can't be filled.
hmm Yes, yeah, I would agree very much, and I think that often in non-traditional societies, particularly sort of Western Eurocentric societies, that initiation has come from war.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, that it is an initiation. There's no doubt about it. And I certainly hold my hands up to the men who have had to be part of that world and managed to survive. I know a number of veterans and people that have been that world, and there's a much more efficient and a much more intentional and a much less violent way of initiating men. And in 2007, when I went through the weekend, yeah, something hugely shifted in me too. What shifted for me was like, I belong here. I
Yeah.
belong in this. and not a belonging that is wrought from violence or from hazing or from separateness or from separating myself from other people or making me better than or anything, but a belonging that this is an atavistic belonging. This is the archetypal belonging of the male of the wild man in me.
Hmm.
And the connection obviously to Robert Bly's work.
Hmm. And it really is unique because it would have been around 2012 that I was living in Duncan, was having, I didn't know at the time, but I was having a hero's journey. It wasn't until afterwards that I put those dots together. I love telling the story. I was driving along in Duncan, looked up and saw a sign on the side of the building that said support for men. And that was Grant Waldman, who was working for the West Coast Men's Society. And that was my first connection with him, was to go into that office and introduce myself. And that was the pathway to a circle that was happening in Duncan, and also that workshop that I spoke of at the beginning. I had no
Yeah.
idea that men sat in circle in that way, that they supported each other emotionally and from a heartfelt place and from a such a practical way of sitting in circle. I had no idea. It blew my mind. I just kept going back. And ultimately I started my own circle in Squamish when I got back to Squamish. So it's like it's hard to really convey that because there's a lot of fear to step towards a circle because of how vulnerable it is. And yet the moment you realize that, oh, this isn't a hazing and it isn't a repeat of what I've experienced and it actually is supportive, again, it's hard to articulate the power of that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I recently came upon an article that was written by a woman. She wrote a book about this in about 2005. The book was called Self-Made Man. She was a lesbian that decided that she wanted to understand this concept of patriarchy, and so she dressed up as a man and got acting lessons and speaking lessons, etc. And then she lived as a man for 18 months. And contrary to what she was looking for, which I believe was the proof that all men are kind of ganging up against women, etc., what she found was all men are raised to completely isolate each other, to put each other down, to not support each other, to separate from each other. And to the point where actually after she had this experience, she ended up being suicidal. She was so traumatized by it. And I've got the book on my Audible feed, which I haven't listened to, but I read this article, and I'm probably not giving her proper justice by referring to it. But I do have experience of growing up in society where every move you make, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you look, the way you dress, was always an opportunity for somebody else in the male society to put me down and
Mhm.
to call me on it or to fight me for it. And so coming into men's work and sitting in a circle where many men I know have expressed concerns about sitting in a circle with males because I don't feel comfortable with other men,
Mhm.
because male society is a society that is engineered and culturally to make sure that everybody, they don't get together unless you've got the old boys club and the hazing thing and all that kind of stuff, and the in group and the out group and the patriarchy. Yeah, sitting in circle with new rules and really feeling belonging and really feeling valued, really allowing that vulnerability and taking the risk to do that certainly has enriched my life hugely. I hate to think of where I would have been if I had not had that experience.
Mhm. And just by showing up every week or as much as you can, it changes you. Just you don't have to do anything. Just showing up and witnessing and seeing the stories, it changes you on such a deep level.
Mm, yeah, yeah, and hearing how much men who have taken that step to sit into the circle and then build the trust and then open up, and I'm amazed at how much suffering there is even just in the day to day that men have that they put on them, whether it's self-inflicted or inflicted by others or society, or just the harshness of I'm not a man because I can't earn enough money to look after my family properly, and how hard they are on themselves just because of that, when in the economic times that we live in now, that's a pretty hard road to hoe. I'm glad that I can sit in a circle and hold space. I sit in the Kings of Heart men's circle in Courtney and Royston area every week, and hold the space of an elder, which is mostly just being very, very little. I'm trying to step back more and more from being active because, again, it's me stepping back and allowing the younger men who are picking up all sorts of skills and ways to facilitate and support each other and hold each other up and to celebrate and to provide a place where men who are really hurting can come and find trust and solace.
Hmm. Yeah. It's such important work.
Yeah, huge.
So this feels like the choice point of either continuing or pausing. And I feel like it's the place to pause and just allow people to digest everything that we've shared. And I just want to end with a question that I always ask every guest, which is, what's one simple way that someone could connect with the sacred today?
Well, I know what my partner would say, and that would be to take a deep breath, just to breathe in the sacred, because that is the connection of all of the world out there, all of the trees and all of the animals and all of the plants and all those molecules and atoms of that are out there coming into my body, and then
Mm,
breathing out that light, my divine light out into the world, and
mm,
just being aware of that breath and really holding it as a sacred act. Because, as soon as it stops, the sacred stops, but certainly life does as well. So there
mm.
is a connection there. So that's what I would answer a quick answer.
Thank you for that, Michael. I really appreciate that answer, and I appreciate you taking the time to share your energy around being and reflecting that to us and reflecting the challenges that can come from trying to be that in the world and slowing down and being more present. As I said, that's something that I struggle with, and it's something that I have experienced in your essence over the years, and I really appreciate the work that you do and the way that you show up, and thank you for sharing that conversation with me today.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope that if there's anything that I've said today that helps somebody get through a hard time or connect a little bit to the sacred and understand the sacred beauty and divineness that is in them, then it's definitely been worth my time to do this. And it's my pleasure. Thanks, Ross, for making this possible.
You're very
Thanks, guys.
welcome. Thank you for joining us on Sacred Sundays. I hope something in today's offering spoke to your spirit, stirred something true, or simply gave you a moment to breathe. If this conversation resonated, please subscribe, rate, or share. It truly helps this work reach the people who are meant to find it. If you'd like to step inside my world a little further, I host a free live practice 3 mornings a week called Start With You. Just 20 minutes on Zoom to return to your own energy. Everything you need can be found at the link in the show notes. Until next time, may your day be slow and sacred.